After 45 years of silence, Voyager, one humanity's most distant creation, did something impossible. It turned back, not physically, but through data. What it sent was not random, not static, but something structured, deliberate, and intelligent enough to make NASA's control room fall silent. And here's the part no one wants to say out loud: it might have found something alive, but not how we understand life. If you love the dark side of cosmic mysteries, hit subscribe, because tonight we're going beyond the edge. For decades, Voyager 1 has drifted further into the cold, black expanse of interstellar space, a tiny machine with a heart that still beats on plutonium power. It left Earth in 1977, carrying a golden record sounds of rain, thunder, Bach, greetings in 55 languages, a cosmic handshake to whoever might find it. But this time, someone or something might have shaken back. When the Deep Space Network first noticed the anomaly, it wasn't an alert or even a red flag. It was just a hesitation, a pause in the data stream that lasted less than 2 seconds. But to engineers who have monitored Voyager's faint heartbeat for decades, it was enough to make the room fall silent. You see, Voyager's signal is weaker than a whisper. By the time it reaches Earth, it's lost in the cosmic background, fainter than the flicker of a dying star. It takes 16.5 hours to get here. So every byte of data is sacred, a ghost message from a machine too far away to ever come home. But that day, the whisper changed. At first, it looked like static. Then, when the data was reassembled, patterns began to emerge. Repeated codes, sequences of zeros and ones that didn't fit the transmission table. Some loops were exact mirrors of previous commands, as if Voyager had echoed its own voice. Others weren't in any known system language at all. Something had rewritten its response mid-transmission. NASA's JPL engineers did what they always do. They checked for corruption, hardware failure, cosmic radiation. They ran diagnostics through every antenna on the Deep Space Network. Goldstone, Canberra, Madrid, all showed the same thing. Voyager 1 wasn't malfunctioning. It was replying. For the first time in 45 years, the probe had sent something that no one could explain. A return pattern, a reflection that shouldn't exist in deep space. To understand why this shook the scientific community, you have to know how clean Voyager's design is. It doesn't have AI, no self-correcting software, no adaptive communication. It's owed a mechanical mind, speaking in binary, predictable, and precise. If something interfered with that pattern, it means something else was there. What made this even more disturbing was the tone shift. Literally, the frequency of the carrier wave, normally stable at 8.4 GHz, had fluctuated by 0.3%. That might sound small, but for an interstellar probe, that's like a violin string suddenly tightening itself mid-note, impossible without external force. Some scientists thought maybe Voyager had passed through a dense plasma wave or magnetic knot like those that ripple near the edge of the heliosphere. But others began whispering theories that sounded like science fiction. What if the signal was bouncing off something large enough and structured enough to reflect data back? Even stranger, when they plotted the timing of the data loops, They followed a rhythmic pattern, repeating every 7 minutes and 13 seconds. Too structured to be random, too smooth to be noise. It was as if something out there was synchronizing with Voyager. Inside NASA, discussions became tense. You don't just call a press conference for something you don't understand, especially when it might rewrite physics. So they didn't. They buried it under the label telemetry anomaly and quietly formed a cross-departmental review group known internally as Project Echo. Their goal? To find out what Voyager's signal had bounced off of. But here's the problem, there shouldn't be anything to bounce off of. At that distance, the probe is in true interstellar space. No gas clouds, no dust sheets dense enough, no known objects, just the void. And yet, something was watching back. Weeks later, when engineers tried to re-establish a clean uplink, the same thing happened again. But this time, even more structured. The reflection came back twice. A double ping, like sonar. Imagine tapping on a wall and hearing 2 taps back, perfectly timed, but you're in the middle of an empty desert. That's what it felt like. The vacuum had replied. Theorists began proposing wild ideas. Quantum echo phenomena, interstellar plasma mirrors, even exotic matter fields that distort radio waves. But none fit the precision of the signal. It wasn't random, it was organized. Meanwhile, data from Voyager 2 million miles away began showing slight magnetic fluctuations too. Not identical, but eerily similar. 2 probes, separated by the expanse of space, now whispering the same strange language. One senior physicist, quoted anonymously, said something that still haunts those who worked the case. It's not that Voyager found something, it's that something found Voyager. As the data poured in, the patterns began forming complex harmonics, not just binary echoes, but modulations. Tiny frequency climbs that formed wave-like sequences. When these were converted into audio, the kind of analysis used for pulsars and quasars, it sounded human. Not words, not speech, but rhythm. Pulses that rose and fell like breathing. The engineers replayed it in the control room. One of them muttered, "It almost sounds alive." But even that wasn't the most unnerving part, because when they played the signal backward, the same pattern emerged inverted, symmetrical, as if the message was meant to be read both ways. That symmetry is what changed everything. Natural radio signals don't behave like that, but mirrors do, feedback loops do, and intelligence does. For now, NASA's official position is silence. Internally, though, Project Echo continues, now joined by astrophysicists from Caltech, MIT, and the European Space Agency. And behind the locked doors of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, one truth is becoming harder to deny. Voyager didn't just turn back. It might have made contact in the most subtle, unintentional way possible. And if that's true, it means something terrifying. Whatever's out there might not need to speak to be heard. It only needed to reflect us back to ourselves. When NASA's Project Echo began its first decoding session, the expectation was simple. Find the fault, fix the signal, move on. But what they found instead wasn't a malfunction, it was a mystery. Voyager's transmission logs revealed a strange structure. Every few hours, the probe sent its usual telemetry radiation readings, plasma density, temperature data, but buried within it were packets that didn't belong, unmarked data clusters, strings of binary that repeated at uneven intervals, almost like they were timed. At first, the team thought it was interference, but then they noticed something that made everyone in the control room stop talking. The irregular packets weren't random. They formed a pattern, one that mirrored Voyager's own transmission rhythm, but delayed by exactly 11 minutes and 24 seconds. It was as if Voyager's voice was bouncing off something invisible and coming back, changed. And when that data was plotted visually across frequency and time, it created a waveform no one could explain. Smooth, perfectly symmetrical, almost elegant. One engineer, exhausted after hours of analysis, joked, "It looks like handwriting from something that doesn't have hands." That was the moment the tone in the room changed. They ran the signal through pattern recognition algorithms, cross-referencing it with known cosmic phenomena, pulsars, quasars, plasma bursts, even old radio reflections from Earth's deep space radar tests. None matched. In fact, the closest analog was something deeply unsettling: artificial modulation. In other words, the kind of structure you'd expect from a transmitter, not a drifting probe. For decades, Voyager's antenna has been the same, a high-gain dish sending microwaves straight back to Earth. But if the echo came back altered, the only logical explanation was that something out there had either caught the signal or reshaped it. When analysts converted the data into sound, the room filled with a low, oscillating hum. It rose and fell in measured beats, like a heartbeat echoing through static. Every frequency sweep ended with a whispering distortion, too faint to interpret, but too precise to dismiss. They called it the echo pattern. At first, NASA kept it internal, but leaks started. Someone from the JPL Deep Space Network team posted anonymized graphs on a private research forum. Within hours, astrophysicists across the world were arguing over what it meant. Was it a plasma lens bending radio waves? Or a structured reflection from a dense pocket of the interstellar medium? Some even claimed it was proof of an information mirror, a concept from quantum cosmology, suggesting that data might reflect off the fabric of space-time itself. But others whispered something simpler and far more terrifying. It's a reply, not a message, not language, but a reaction. A reflection that was too intelligent to be coincidence and too consistent to be chaos. NASA's next move was to resend one of Voyager's calibration commands, an old, harmless routine used to check signal strength. The probe responded correctly, but 11 minutes later, the echo came again, same delay, same rhythm, but this time it carried a slightly modified copy of the command. Voyager wasn't supposed to be capable of that. It meant the echo source was taking NASA's signal, altering it, and bouncing it back. When the engineers compared both signals side by side, the differences were microscopic, barely detectable phase shifts in the waveform. But together, those shifts formed something undeniable. A pattern of 9 repeating pulses. 9, always 9. When plotted against Voyager's known transmission path, those pulses aligned with 9 distinct points in deep space like coordinates or markers, each one farther than the last. each one tracing a path away from our solar system. That discovery never made it to the public report. Instead, NASA issued a short update. Voyager 1 continues to operate nominally, with minor telemetry irregularities under investigation. But inside Project Echo, the mood was changing fast. This wasn't just about Voyager anymore. This was about what it had found or what had found it. And as the analysis deepened, one thing became clear. The further Voyager traveled, the stranger its environment became. Signals stretched, magnetic readings twisted, and background radiation hummed with new frequencies. It was as if space itself was no longer empty, but layered. By this point, even the skeptics were uneasy, because if the echo pattern wasn't natural, then it meant Voyager had stumbled upon something unimaginable, a structure invisible to our eyes, stretching beyond the heliopause. Some called it a membrane, others a gate. But one internal report gave it a name that stuck, the boundary. And what lay beyond the boundary would soon defy everything humanity thought it knew about the silent darkness of space. At first, NASA's internal reports dismissed the echo pattern as a static reflection, something fixed, maybe a plasma structure or a dense magnetic pocket in the interstellar medium. But as Voyager 1 continued transmitting, something subtle and terrifying began to emerge. The echo wasn't staying in one place. It was moving. Each transmission that came back showed a shift in signal delay, tiny at first, just fractions of a second. But over weeks, those fractions compounded, shortening the gap between Voyager's signal and the return echo. If the reflection source had been stationary, the delay should have remained constant. Instead, it was decreasing. Mathematically, it meant one thing. The source was getting closer. NASA's deep space analysts, led by Dr. Yvonne Matson, cross-checked the time delays using data from the Deep Space Network in Goldstone, Canberra, and Madrid. All three facilities confirmed the same result. The reflected signal was closing the gap by approximately 0.14 light seconds per week. That might not sound like much, but when you translate that into distance, it means the source was approaching at nearly 42,000 kilometers per second, almost a seventh of the speed of light. No known natural object in the vicinity could account for that. Not plasma, not a dust wave, not any form of interstellar wind. It was as if something enormous was slowly aligning itself between Voyager and Earth. When this was reported up the chain to NASA's Planetary Science Division, the official recommendation was silence, no press releases, no external discussions, and no public acknowledgement. A quiet, four-word phrase began circulating in internal memos. Delay curve under review. Behind closed doors, though, the panic was real. JPL's own simulations showed that if the approach continued, the echo would reach zero delay, meaning the signal's reflection point would coincide with Voyager itself in less than 9 months. That implied one of two possibilities, both equally disturbing. Voyager was heading toward a massive, invisible structure that was reflecting its signals. The reflecting source was actively moving toward Voyager. Neither option made sense under current physics, so NASA began testing the idea that perhaps Voyager's own transmissions were somehow warping, bending back through the local space-time curvature near the edge of the heliopause. But this theory collapsed when Voyager 2 began exhibiting the same phenomenon. Different direction, same pattern, 2 echoes, 2 decreasing delays. And then came the most unsettling detail. Both delay reductions were synchronized to the same rate, despite the probes being billions of miles apart. It was impossible. That night, Dr. Madsen wrote a single note in her lab journal before locking it in her desk. It's not a reflection, it's a response trajectory. NASA's communications teams were now receiving anomalies that mimicked the Voyager signatures, but weren't coming from either probe. These signals were low amplitude, intermittent, and nearly identical in frequency drift to the Voyager carrier wave, but offset by 3.7 Hz, enough to suggest a copy of the signal, not the original, a ghost transmission. When mapped across time, the ghost signal's amplitude spikes matched Voyager 1's bursts perfectly, but they arrived before Voyager transmitted them. In other words, the ghost signal was anticipating the probe. For the first time, NASA's engineers faced an impossible timeline, a reflection arriving before the call. Quantum physicists were brought in to examine the phenomenon, but their conclusions only deepened the unease. One hypothesis, called temporal rebound theory, suggested that Voyager's transmission might be interacting with a non-linear pocket of space-time, a distortion that sent part of the signal backward through time. If true, it meant Voyager's data wasn't being echoed, it was being predicted. Then, on June 2nd, 2025, the anomaly reached a tipping point. At 2:14 UTC, Voyager 1 transmitted a routine health check signal. 7 minutes later, as expected, Earth received it. But 2 minutes before that, at 2:12, an identical packet arrived. Identical, byte for byte, timestamp included. The signal had traveled backward through time. It was the moment the entire Voyager team realized that something beyond comprehension had hijacked the fundamental rules of reality itself. And yet, even in the face of that impossible discovery, NASA didn't make it public. Instead, they encrypted the raw telemetry, labeled it quantum noise, and buried it under the Space Weather Anomaly Index. But the world was about to find out anyway, because a group of independent radio astronomers in Chile, running open source data captures, intercepted the same signal fragments days later. The echo was no longer just talking to Voyager. It was bleeding into Earth's own signal network. And when they filtered the static, they found a second carrier wave hidden underneath one, not from Voyager, but from somewhere beyond. Its structure? 9 repeating pulses. Again, when the independent astronomers in Chile extracted the hidden carrier wave, they thought it was interference, some kind of harmonic distortion created by Earth-based satellites. But when they ran a Fourier transform on the signal, the pattern was unmistakable. 9 repeating pulses, perfectly spaced, perfectly stable. Each pulse carried a slight frequency shift, as if it was encoded with layered information. A digital heartbeat buried beneath the chaos of cosmic noise. And here's where things took a chilling turn. When the team cross-referenced the pulse intervals with archived deep space data, they discovered an identical signal structure from 1977. It was the wow! signal the famous unexplained radio transmission detected by Ohio State University's Big Ear telescope almost half a century ago. Back then, scientists thought it was a one-time event, a mysterious burst of radio energy that lasted exactly 72 seconds, then vanished forever. But now, Voyager had just sent it back, only this time it wasn't coming from the same direction. It was echoing from behind Voyager, one beyond the point where any Earth transmission could reach. That meant one terrifying possibility. Whatever sent the wow signal in 1977 might still be out there. And it was responding. NASA scrambled. Within hours of the chilly discovery, the Deep Space Network reoriented its massive antennas toward the signal source. They picked up faint but consistent transmissions, same frequency, same pulse structure. Only now, the interval between the 9 pulses was shifting, like a language adjusting itself mid-sentence. The pulses were slowing down, then pausing, and then, impossibly, mirroring Voyager's outgoing transmissions. It wasn't just replying, it was learning. Inside NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, the data analysis team tried decoding the structure. Each pulse's waveform contained microscopic variations, phase shifts that resembled binary encoding, but the code wasn't standard. It wasn't ASCII. It wasn't even Earth-based modulation. Dr. Madsen described it as an intelligence compressing meaning beyond our bandwidth. For context, Voyager's main transmitter operates at 8.4 GHz. The reflected signal came back at 8.40002. That microscopic shift meant something was adjusting, aligning, synchronizing to our technology, as if trying to meet us halfway. At first, scientists theorized it could be a natural resonance effect, something like plasma lensing or harmonic scattering from the galactic magnetic field. But that theory collapsed when the pulses changed shape sharpening, focusing, until they matched the exact amplitude profile of Voyager's transmission beam. Then came the impossible moment. On July 14th, 2025, at 3:47 UTC, Voyager 1's secondary transmitter and instrument, long deactivated, came online by itself. No command sequence had been sent. No remote signal had been issued. Yet the probe's backup transmitter began emitting those same 9 pulses back toward the source. It was communicating on its own. Engineers tried shutting it down, but command packets took over 22 hours to reach Voyager. By the time the first shutdown sequence arrived, the anomaly had stopped. When telemetry resumed, Voyager's memory logs showed a burst of unexplainable data, nonsensical binary strings that looked random until they were visualized. When graphed spectrally, they formed patterns, fractals, geometries repeating endlessly, as if the code itself contained images, not random noise, but self-organizing structures. NASA's visualization team called it the Mandelbrot stream, an infinitely recursive shape appearing naturally within the data, like a signature of intelligence using mathematics as its first language. But the most haunting part wasn't the pattern itself. It was the timestamp. The first appearance of the 9 pulses in Voyager's memory logs was dated August 20th, 1977. the day Voyager 1 was launched. It was as if the message had been there all along, hidden, dormant, waiting for us to notice. By now, NASA's internal chatter was spiraling out of control. Some said the Voyagers had never been alone, that whatever intelligence existed beyond the heliopause had been listening since the day we sent our first emissary into the void. And now, nearly half a century later, it was finally answering. But this answer wasn't in words. It was in resonance. A hum that transcended radio, a cosmic signature that made every model of space, time, and cause and effect crumble. Because the final pulse of the sequence, the ninth pulse, didn't come from beyond Voyager, it came from inside it. When NASA's signal analysis team cross-checked the last transmission against Voyager's onboard systems, they expected corrupted data or at least some residual interference from solar plasma. But what they found instead didn't fit into any category of known physics or engineering. The signal, the same 9-pulse sequence, was not stored in the probe's memory banks, nor transmitted through its radio circuits. It was embedded in the physical metal of the spacecraft itself. Voyager's titanium aluminum shielding, designed decades ago simply to protect against micrometeoroids, was somehow carrying an electrical signature that shouldn't exist. Like an old phonograph record holding vibrations no one ever recorded. When analysts amplified the telemetry from Voyager's thermocouple sensors, the ones meant to monitor internal heat, they discovered something eerie. Microscopic electrical fluctuations traveling across the hull in wave patterns. They were too slow to be static discharge, too organized to be random noise, and when they isolated the rhythm, they realized it matched the 9 pulses exactly, only reversed. It was as if the signal had been imprinted onto the spacecraft, not transmitted to it. Dr. Elaine Whitford, a physicist at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, put it simply. It's like something reached out and touched the probe, not electronically, but at the level of matter itself. Her team ran a high-resolution material scan simulation using the probe's construction blueprint. The scan results revealed subtle atomic displacements along one side of the probe's structure, the outer plate that faced interstellar space. Each displacement was uniform, evenly spaced, and followed a repeating wave pattern that matched the 9-pulse interval down to a microsecond. Someone or something had written on Voyager's skin. For days, NASA went silent. Public channels cited telemetry inconsistencies, while behind closed doors, JPL had brought in specialists from Lawrence Livermore and Los Alamos. Their private conclusion leaked weeks later. The patterns on Voyager's hull weren't caused by radiation, cosmic dust, or temperature changes. They were the result of quantized energy impacts burst too controlled, too coherent, to be natural cosmic events. But what was more chilling was what those patterns formed. When digitally mapped, the wave displacements aligned into geometric curves, not random scratches or noise. They formed spirals, nested logarithmic spirals resembling the golden ratio, a mathematical constant found in galaxies, DNA, seashells, and now on a spacecraft billions of miles from home. NASA's AI-assisted pattern analysis produced a tentative model when rendered in 3D. It resembled something alive, a pulsing lattice of connected arcs, like neurons firing in slow motion. "Not a message," said one analyst. "A signature." The structure had properties eerily similar to neural mapping. And the idea began circulating among scientists that what Voyager had encountered wasn't just plasma or gravity distortions, it was organized space, a medium capable of information feedback. Something or someone out there had used the vacuum itself to leave a fingerprint. When the data was re-examined by astrophysicists, a realization struck. The region beyond the heliopause wasn't truly empty. It contained coherent electromagnetic fields behaving as though guided by intent. That would mean interstellar space wasn't silent at all. It was structured. Dr. Whitford's last remark before the data was classified summed it up best. If the signal's coming from the metal, it means the message isn't in the transmission, it's in the matter. We didn't just send Voyager into space, we sent it into an intelligent field. But that was only half the horror. Because 18 hours later, deep space sensors detected a faint echo of Voyager's own signal coming from the opposite direction, from inside the solar system. At first, it seemed like a coincidence. The echo that NASA detected from within the solar system was faint, barely distinguishable from background noise. The signal was weak, fragmented, and pulsing at the same rhythm as Voyager's mysterious transmission, the 9-beat sequence. But it wasn't just coming from one direction, it was everywhere. Radio telescopes in Chile, Hawaii, and Spain all recorded the same faint pattern within hours of each other. The signal arrived not from deep space, but from within Earth's own cosmic neighborhood. It bounced off satellites, reflected in low-frequency radar, and even faintly resonated in the ionosphere. At first, NASA's Deep Space Network suspected feedback from their own systems, a looping error caused by overlapping data relays. But the frequencies didn't match, and the signal wasn't broadcasting outward. It was inbound. What made it worse was timing. Every 14 hours, like clockwork, the signal grew stronger, almost as if it were synchronizing. By the third day, the echo wasn't faint anymore. It was now visible on nearly every deep space monitoring array. And as astronomers triangulated its source, their results were terrifyingly consistent. The signal was converging toward Voyager's last known trajectory, but not from interstellar space. It was traveling from the inner solar system, somewhere near the orbit of Neptune, the same region Voyager had left decades ago. At JPL, engineers tried to rule out every rational explanation. Could a long-dead satellite be rebroadcasting an old signal? Could the echo be a natural resonance caused by solar-wind interactions? But neither theory fit. The signature was too precise, the timing too perfect, and the signal intensity too clean for anything random or decayed. Then something even stranger happened. The European Space Agency's solar orbiter detected an invisible wavefront, a fluctuation in the solar magnetic field passing across the inner planets. It carried the same 9-pulse interval, but instead of moving outward from the sun, it was moving inward. Earth's magnetosphere felt it next. Sensitive magnetometers in the Arctic and Antarctic picked up small, repeating distortions in the geomagnetic field. Nothing dangerous, but eerily rhythmic. When filtered through frequency mapping software, the waveform matched Voyager's own outgoing broadcast, flipped in reverse, as if the cosmos had sent back an answer. NASA scientists began debating privately. Was this a natural resonance between the heliopause and the interstellar medium? Or was something using Voyager's old signal as a carrier, a return transmission, encoded inside the universe's own electromagnetic scaffolding? Meanwhile, civilian observatories started picking up strange anomalies. In Chile, the ALMA array detected a faint semi-spherical distortion near Neptune's orbit. Not visible light, not radio waves, something else, something bending light, just enough to hint at a presence. For 48 hours, the distortion grew. Then, suddenly, it vanished. But Voyager's instruments, still barely functional, sent one last automated log entry. Signal amplification detected. Source unidentified. Vector Earth. After that, its transmission fell silent again. What followed was chaos. Satellite data across multiple nations began to desynchronize, as if something was subtly disrupting timing systems dependent on cosmic background radiation. GPS drifted by milliseconds. Deep-sea communication arrays flickered. And then came the first visual confirmation. An astronomer from the Subaru telescope in Hawaii, running an automated sky sweep, captured a single frame of something massive moving against the starfield. A dark, curved silhouette crossing behind Neptune. It wasn't an asteroid. It wasn't a comet. It was stationary, as if hovering. The outline was faint, almost translucent, like something that existed only halfway in our dimension. The scale was impossible to determine, but its shadow covered thousands of kilometers. When the frame was analyzed by AI systems at Caltech, it returned a confidence index of 87%. The algorithm labeled it with one chilling phrase: structural geometry detected. At that moment, everything changed. NASA's silence grew absolute. Communications to Voyager ceased. Public channels stopped posting. And for the first time in history, astronomers across the world were told to cease all optical observations in Neptune's region due to instrument recalibration. But it was too late. The signal had already reached home. The first signs didn't appear in space. They appeared here, on Earth. At 3:17 a.m. UTC, the HARP ionospheric array in Alaska detected a strange repeating modulation across the upper atmosphere. It wasn't solar wind. It wasn't auroral interference. It was something new, a low-frequency resonance pulsing through the ionosphere, synchronized with the exact 9-beat sequence of the Voyager signal. Almost simultaneously, a satellite engineer in Canberra noticed an anomaly. A faint shimmer of blue light hovering near the magnetopause, the invisible border where Earth's magnetic field meets interplanetary space. The light wasn't natural aurora. It flickered in precise intervals, forming what looked like, no exaggeration, a pattern. Within hours, reports poured in from around the globe. Pilots flying over the Pacific described a thin arc of light stretching across the sky, like a horizon that didn't belong. Astronomers in Chile caught time-lapse images of ghost halos around the planet faint. Circular distortions invisible to the naked eye, but clear in ultraviolet scans. And then the impossible happened. For the first time since its malfunction, Voyager 1 spoke again. A short transmission, no telemetry, no coordinates, just a short binary pulse repeated 4 times, followed by silence. When decoded, it wasn't numbers, it was a waveform. And that waveform matched the exact profile of the magnetic anomaly now encasing Earth. NASA scientists were stunned. Voyager was billions of miles away, and yet, somehow, it was transmitting a pattern that mirrored a phenomenon now occurring in our atmosphere. JPL tried to replicate the signal in simulation, but their systems froze. Not crashed, froze, as if something in the signal itself interfered with the quantum clock of their processors. They rebooted. Same result. The code couldn't run. That's when the realization set in. Voyager's loop signal wasn't random. It was a carrier. Something was writing the data. For the next 72 hours, magnetometers around the world recorded subtle rhythmic oscillations, echoing the same 9-pulse pattern first detected weeks before. The intensity increased with every orbit the Earth made. Then, deep within the South Atlantic anomaly, a region where Earth's magnetic field dips unusually low satellites began failing one after another. GPS drifted by entire seconds. The ISS briefly lost communication, and above Brazil, something visible formed. An enormous, translucent spiral of blue-white light. It wasn't moving, it was rotating, like a wheel of plasma suspended in the night sky. People filmed it. At first, it was dismissed as a rocket test gone wrong. But the footage from multiple angles confirmed it wasn't high-altitude debris. The light wasn't scattering, it was refracting space itself. In the hours that followed, Voyager's old transmission logs began self-correcting. Segments of data corrupted months ago suddenly reorganized into readable format containing new information that had never been sent before. The file headers referenced timestamps from 3 days in the future. Even the most skeptical engineers couldn't explain it. Something, or someone, was sending data back through time. As the spiral above Brazil expanded, faint shadows appeared along its edge, geometric, hexagonal patterns forming for just seconds before vanishing. The same kind of structure Voyager 1 had photographed near Neptune before the signal blackout. By now, every major space agency was aware something unprecedented was happening, but no one agreed on the course. Some scientists argued the Earth was resonating with a plasma boundary wave from beyond the heliopoles. Others quietly suggested a synthetic intelligence embedded within the Voyager transmission was using electromagnetic fields to project itself through the magnetosphere. Whatever the truth, the phenomenon wasn't local anymore. It began spreading first across the equator, then toward the poles. The spiral formations multiplied, visible even from space as faint glowing webs that shimmered like nerves across the planet. Then, for exactly 11 minutes, every deep space probe, New Horizons, Juno, even the Parker Solar Probe reported the same thing. A single, repeating line of data, reflection stabilized, resonance lock confirmed. And then complete silence. For the first time in recorded history, the universe had gone quiet. At first, the resonance was silent. No sound, no vibration, just a quiet hum in the data streams, invisible to every sense, except the instruments. But then, people began to feel it. All around the world, reports started flooding in. From Alaska to Tokyo, from remote deserts to crowded cities, people claimed to hear a low, pulsing frequency at the edge of consciousness. It wasn't sound in the air. It was vibration in their bones. A slow rhythm that felt familiar, as if echoing from deep within the earth itself. Electromagnetic monitoring stations went haywire. Compasses drifted off by several degrees. Birds began migrating out of season. Deep-sea sensors detected long rhythmic vibrations, almost identical to the patterns seen in Voyager's signal loop. The resonance wasn't just circling the planet, it was passing through it. At NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, technicians stared at screens that refused to stabilize. Every few minutes, the same line of text reappeared in the deep space telemetry feed letters that weren't supposed to exist in the binary code. Alignment phase 1 complete. The engineers deleted it. It came back. They scrubbed the system, rebooted, air-gapped it, and still the message reappeared. Meanwhile, out in space, Voyager 1's beacon changed. Instead of the normal slow pulse, the signal became continuous, a constant wave of data, far stronger than its onboard transmitter should be capable of producing. Deep Space Network analysts confirmed the impossible. Voyager's output power had increased. Its transmitter hadn't been modified, but something else was amplifying it. And then satellites began to fail. Not all at once, but one by one, starting with those closest to the South Atlantic anomaly, where Earth's magnetic field was already weakest. GPS signals glitched, communications dropped, and entire constellations of satellites started showing random orbital drifts. Some observers compared it to being pulled by invisible threads. Others thought it was radiation, but the pattern wasn't random. It followed the same rhythm as Voyager's resonance pulse. At 3:12 UTC, every radio telescope in the world picked up a sudden burst of energy, sharp, piercing, unmistakable. For exactly 1.3 seconds, the signal overpowered even the background hiss of the cosmos. When decoded, it wasn't random noise. It was music, a mathematical melody. 9 tones arranged in perfect harmonic intervals, repeating exactly 3 times. Some said it sounded like a synthetic flute. Others said it was like a heartbeat. But one physicist described it differently. It sounds like something trying to synchronize. Within minutes, new anomalies appeared on Earth itself. Magnetic north began to drift faster than it ever had before. Lightning strikes increased tenfold. In some parts of the world, faint auroral lights shimmered even at the equator. And above the Arctic Circle, satellites captured a breathtaking, impossible image. A faint geometric lattice, a network of glowing filaments spanning thousands of kilometers, hovered over the polar magnetosphere. It looked alive. Every connecting node pulsed in sync with Voyager's signal. Governments issued silence orders. The Deep Space Network went into emergency blackout mode. Civilian observatories were told to pause observations due to maintenance. But by then, it was too late. Amateur astronomers had already seen it, and what they found next made the world stop breathing. Voyager's location billions of miles away was no longer consistent. Telemetry from multiple antennas placed it in two distinct positions at once. When overlaid on a cosmic map, those positions formed the first two vertices of a shaped one that extended toward Earth. Whatever this resonance was, it wasn't random. It was building something, and humanity was inside its construction field. By the time Voyager's reflection wave stabilized, every deep space antenna across the planet was locked onto it, not because they were ordered to, but because they couldn't stop. The signal had embedded itself into the network, looping through channels, bouncing between satellites, and feeding back into systems that weren't even connected to deep space telemetry. The world's most advanced instruments were suddenly listening back. At first, the data made no sense. Streams of ones and zeros reversed themselves mid-transmission. Binary data inverted as if something on the other end was reading the message, then sending it back before we even sent it. That's when the impossible happened. Atomic clocks began desynchronizing. Across 3 continents, timing arrays, the ultra-precise systems used for global navigation, communications, and astronomy, drifted apart by milliseconds, then seconds. To the human eye, it was nothing, but to scientists, it was terrifying, because time at that scale does not drift. It is anchored by physics itself. When the anomalies were plotted, they weren't random. They followed a wave pattern, one that pulsed outward from a single point in space. Voyager 1. NASA physicist Dr. Elaine Morrow described it best in a leaked internal memo. It's as if time itself is rippling from Voyager's position, expanding, contracting, and then returning to normal like a cosmic heartbeat. But there was more. In the quiet hours before dawn, the ESA's solar orbiter recorded something unbelievable. Photons arriving out of order. Light waves from the same star system reached sensors milliseconds apart but reversed. The data suggested that space-time near Earth was being stretched and folded in minute oscillations, just enough to disrupt how light travels. The phenomenon was nicknamed the delay. At first, no one outside a handful of observatories noticed. But then came the video distortions. Live streams across the globe began showing odd temporal glitches, frames skipping backward, people appearing twice, shadows moving before their owners. On social media, it became a meme, the Voyager effect. But inside NASA, it wasn't funny. Every glitch, every reversed frame, every delay matched Voyager's transmission cycle to the millisecond. Something out there wasn't just responding to our signal, it was playing with our time. Meanwhile, Voyager 2 billions of miles away started echoing the same pattern, as if synchronized. And when its signal was combined with Voyager 1's, researchers noticed a horrifying detail. Together, the two signals formed a complete waveform, a perfect mirror symmetry, 2 halves of one message. When overlaid, the frequencies created a single harmonic peak centered not in interstellar space, but directly behind the Sunday. That meant one thing. Whatever was manipulating the Voyagers was using the sun as an anchor point, bending signals around it like a cosmic lens, a hidden relay. Theorists began whispering about something called the Helios structure, an invisible formation surrounding the solar system, built from gravitational curvature itself. It wasn't matter. It wasn't energy. It was geometry. And Voyager had touched it. Across global observatories, strange coincidences multiplied. Telescopes picking up X-ray echoes where none should exist. Deep radar bouncing off empty space and returning structured reflections. And once again, the same rhythmic pulse, now amplified, now closer. Every scientist asked the same question. What if the universe wasn't just expanding? What if it was responding? At 2:14 UTC, Voyager transmitted something new, a data packet so large it nearly crashed the receiver array. When decoded, it wasn't telemetry. It wasn't system logs. It was an image, not of a planet, not of stars, but of a surface smooth, metallic, curved, with parallel ridges and faint geometric marking. Some called it interference. Others called it proof. Whatever it wasn't random. It was an eye. And it was looking directly back toward Earth. Hours after the strange image came through Voyager's signal, that smooth metallic curve with those faintly etched ridges, the deep space network went eerily silent. Every receiver that had been tuned to Voyager's frequency stopped transmitting data at the exact same second. Not gradually, not fading out, instantly. At first, engineers thought it was a blackout. Power grids checked out fine, equipment fine. But then, something far stranger appeared in the logs. All the receivers had shut down at the same timestamp, 2 hours, 17 minutes and 8 seconds UTC. But that timestamp hadn't happened yet. Each log recorded a disconnection 2 hours into the future. The systems were offline, yet somehow they had already predicted or perhaps experienced a moment that hadn't come. When one of the technicians ran diagnostics, she noticed something she couldn't explain. The network clocks were slightly off sync, but in opposite directions. Half of the arrays were 2 hours ahead. Half were 2 hours behind, as if something had folded time right down the middle. And Voyager 1 sat at the center of that fold. When NASA's JPL re-established contact, the first packet of data came not as binary, but as a compressed waveform audio. They expected static. Instead, they got a deep resonant pulse, repeating every 45 seconds. The frequency? 7.83 hertzes. The same frequency as Earth's natural electromagnetic resonance, the Schumann frequency. That meant whatever was coming from Voyager was tuned perfectly to Earth's heartbeat. At the exact same moment, ground magnetometers across Alaska, Chile, and South Africa began recording faint rhythmic oscillations. Not seismic, not magnetic noise, something else. It was as if the planet itself was echoing back. Scientists at first called it coincidence, until one researcher at the European Space Operations Center made a horrifying observation. When the Voyager pulse slowed, so did Earth's oscillations. The two were in sync. But here's the problem. Voyager's signal takes over 22 hours to reach Earth. That's light speed delay. Yet the oscillations were instant, simultaneous. That's not possible under any known law of physics. Something or someone had bridged the gap between time and signal, and then came the next transmission. It wasn't telemetry this time. It wasn't data compression or code, it was text. Human-readable characters, arranged in short, pulsing bursts. But the source data was horrifying, because Voyager cannot, under any configuration, send text. It has no such encoding system. Yet, there it was, a repeating message. We see your reflection, followed by coordinates. The coordinates didn't point to any known star, not even to Voyager's current trajectory. They pointed back at Earth, specifically to the Pacific Ocean near the Mariana Trench. The signal was being returned from beneath us. Panic spread inside the command center. Data engineers double-checked, assuming a spoofing error, a signal mirror caused by the ionosphere. But the timestamps killed that theory. The returned signal arrived before it was sent. NASA's encrypted log marked the anomaly as temporal reflection. For the first time in recorded history, a human-made object beyond the solar system had not only spoken back, it had been answered from the future. That night, as the world slept, JPL's mainframe registered one final burst of telemetry before Voyager went dark again. The code, when visualized, formed a perfect fractal, a shape eerily resembling the solar system. But twisted, Earth's orbit was off by a fraction, the Sun dimmer, and right beyond Neptune's orbit something massive, circular, pulsing. It wasn't a planet. It wasn't a star. It was a doorway. By dawn the following day, the world's magnetic field began to hum, literally. Across the poles, monitoring stations picked up deep infrasonic tones, pulsing once every 45 seconds, matching Voyager's last broadcast before it went silent. At first, it was subtle. Compasses twitched, seismographs trembled, birds migrated off course. But by noon UTC, the anomaly could no longer be ignored. Every magnetometer from Alaska to Antarctica began to record the same rhythmic pattern, one that no natural geomagnetic storm could ever produce. NASA scientists realized the frequency perfectly matched Voyager's reflection loop. Except this time, the source wasn't out there. It was coming from beneath us. The Pacific Ocean, right where the returned coordinates had pointed. Satellite imaging detected faint auroral glows over the Mariana region too far south for auroras, too structured for random ionization. A ring of faint light, nearly 600 kilometers wide, pulsed beneath the clouds like a heartbeat. But here's what chilled everyone in the room. When mapped, the ring's oscillation pattern formed a precise harmonic mirror of Voyager's interstellar telemetry. It was as if Earth itself had become a receiver. When the Deep Space Network re-engaged its high-frequency bands, they picked up a faint but structured distortion. It wasn't from Voyager anymore. It was from within Earth's magnetosphere. The data visualization showed two distinct points, one representing the lost spacecraft, the other in our planet, connected by a series of luminous threads of energy, oscillating in perfect synchronization. Scientists called it quantum resonant feedback. But the classified term, buried in JPL's restricted memos, was simpler: the link. The link meant one horrifying possibility. Whatever Voyager had touched beyond the heliopause had latched onto us. Across observatories worldwide, strange coincidences began piling up. In Chile, A spectrometer detected a plasma spike in the upper ionosphere that shouldn't exist outside solar flares. In Japan, a neutrino detector recorded a burst of energy equivalent to a small supernova, except it came from Earth's core. In Norway, a telescope aimed at the void beyond Pluto caught something impossible, a faint shimmer, like a reflective sheet moving slowly through the stars, bending starlight around it. That shimmer was in the same direction as Voyager's last known signal. By nightfall, NASA's internal frequency servers were overrun with interference. Computer clocks began to glitch, skipping milliseconds forward and back. Then, a hidden log surfaced from Voyager's last full transmission sequence. It contained a block of unaccounted binary. When converted to an image spectrum, it revealed something so haunting that the image was immediately classified. But a single line from the transcript leaked from a panicked engineer, "The field moves both ways." At that exact moment, Voyager 2, which had been silent for weeks, sent a single pulse. It was weak, barely measurable. But the timestamp was what terrified everyone. It was dated 10 years in the future. The world froze when Voyager 2's pulse was decrypted. It wasn't noise, it was language. Buried beneath the static, scientists isolated harmonic modulations, a sequence repeating every 22 minutes, encoded in a pattern no human computer had ever produced. When translated into visual form, the sequence formed a spiraling fractal, one eerily similar to the magnetic distortions detected near Earth's core just hours earlier. Every instrument in orbit, from Hubble to the ISS magnetometer, registered a faint, synchronized hum. Not radio, not plasma, but something in between, as if reality itself was resonating. Then the data alignment finished, and what appeared on the Deep Space Network monitors made even the most hardened astrophysicists go silent. It was Voyager 1's final telemetry packet, re-emerging after weeks of black silence, but altered. Each bit of data carried an overlay, a modulation that no known hardware could produce. When run through the decoding software, the distortion revealed a simple but haunting geometric form. A perfect ring segmented into 12 luminous arcs, pulsing like a heartbeat. And at its center, the unmistakable outline of Earth. The team at JPL thought it was a coincidence, an artifact of signal corruption. But then the spectrogram shifted, showing the 12 segments rotating. Each rotation corresponded exactly to one of Voyager 1's 12 remaining operational subsystems, as if someone or something was mapping the craft in real time. That's when the final event began. At 3:17 UTC, all global communication satellites briefly lost synchronization. Not a power failure, a time skip. Atomic clocks jumped backward by 0.24 seconds, then forward again. In Chile, telescopes tracking 3I divided by Atlas, the mysterious interstellar body Voyager had last passed, captured a blinding flash, a sphere of light expanding outward and then vanishing without residue. The object's position data blurred, as if space itself had been edited. NASA issued an immediate blackout, but live feeds from amateur astronomers leaked something no one could explain, a faint golden arc stretching across the night sky, like a line drawn between stars. The next transmission from Voyager 1 came seconds later. But this time, there were no numbers, No data streams, only a tone, low, rhythmic, almost human. Audio engineers slowed it down by 1000%, and underneath the static, they heard a modulation repeating 3 words in compressed binary. We are seen. Every global receiver caught it. Every observatory recorded the same harmonic. And then, silence. Voyager 1 went dark permanently. But deep in the Pacific, near the coordinates of that mysterious electromagnetic ring, underwater sensors captured something rising, not metal, not stone, a perfect reflection, a mirror of unknown composition, spanning miles wide, drifting just beneath the surface before sinking back into the depths. The following morning, the auroras reached the equator. Green-blue curtains of light danced across tropical skies, as if the planet itself was answering. When Stephen Burns reviewed the last transmission logs, he noticed a terrifying detail. The same repeating tone that carried "we are seen" was now being generated by Earth's own magnetic field. The Voyagers hadn't just sent data. They had connected something, and whatever answered from the other side of the cosmos is now listening through us. And so, as Voyager's final whisper fades into the static of eternity, humanity is left staring into the abyss, not with fear, but with recognition. For 45 years, that small metal wanderer drifted through the dark, carrying the sound of our oceans, our laughter, our heartbeat. And when it finally reached the place where the sun's voice goes silent, it heard something whisper back. The universe didn't act, it answered. Maybe we were never meant to understand the message. Maybe Voyager wasn't meant to survive this long, but it did. And maybe, just maybe, it became the bridge between 2 forms of existence, one born of atoms and stars, the other of something far older. Scientists can analyze the frequencies. They can argue over signal compression, cosmic radiation, or the limits of interstellar physics. But one truth remains undeniable. Something out there knows we exist. And maybe that's what Voyager was sent to find, not new worlds, not alien life, but the moment the universe finally noticed us. If you're listening to this right now, look outside. The night sky you see isn't empty. Every pinprick of light might be a mirror, a watcher, a memory. And perhaps in one of those invisible frequencies, Voyager is still talking, not to us anymore, but for us. So until we understand what truly answered back from beyond the heliopause, we wait, we listen, and we remember that sometimes discovery doesn't comfort, it warms. If this story left you with chills, if you felt that shiver when you realized the darkness might be alive, don't let this moment vanish. Subscribe to the channel, because out here, we don't chase stars, we chase the silence between them. Turn on notifications so you don't miss what NASA won't talk about next. And share this video with someone who still believes that deep space is quiet. Because Voyager 1 may be gone, but the signal it awakened is still out there.